Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I wanted to talk about some very popular books that I personally did not like. Obviously, everybody has their own taste in books, and just because one person likes something doesn't mean that another person will like it. But it happens to be with really popular books, I always try to read them because I think like if the majority of people did enjoy it, then it is more of a likely chance that I will enjoy it as well. But today I have a stack of books that I wanted to share with you that I read because they were really popular, because they were being pushed in my face left and right, and people were saying such amazing things about it. I just wanted to check it out for myself. And then I ended up being extremely disappointed for a very, very specific reason. So I wanted to share those reasons with you as to why I didn't like a lot of these extremely popular books that I see all over my social media all the time. And I'm just throwing it out there that if you did like these books a lot and like you don't agree with all of my thoughts, then that is perfectly okay. Everybody has the right to have their own opinion. And just because you enjoy this book and I'm therefore bashing it doesn't mean that I'm bashing on your taste specifically. We just have different tastes, and that is totally okay. So this video was actually inspired by a recent read of mine that got me in the mood to bash some books, and that is Lessons in Corruption by Gianna Darling. So this is the first book in the Fallen Men Companion series, and in this series you're following this motorcycle club, and each book there is a different guy from the motorcycle club or somebody very connected to the club, and then they're going to have their own romance. So all of these books are kind of forbidden romances. They're age gap romances, very large age gaps, very taboo, very out there, very steamy reads, like all around the board. Everything I just said sounds like something that would definitely be up my alley. And then add in the fact that everybody raves about this series, everybody seems to love it, is like always talking about it. I see this on my feed all the freaking time. So I finally picked up book one, and then I was so freaking disappointed. I literally read the first page and I was already ready to DNF it, and I should have listened to myself, but I didn't. I have to read you the first sentence of this book. It literally says, "I saw him in a parking lot when I was picking up groceries. Not the most romantic place to fall in love at first sight, but I guess you can't choose these things." And guys, I hate love at first sight, and literally I saw it in the first chapter, and for some reason I was like, come on, she's not gonna really do that. Like, come on, how would people like this book if it was literally love at first sight? Like, nobody likes love at first sight, or I guess maybe it's just me. But my point is that I saw that and I was hoping that it wouldn't end up working out that way, and then it definitely was that way. Like, they literally said like, well, I fall in love with you the first second that I saw you, like 5 times in this book, and I'm just like, no. You know, like, I don't have a problem if people see each other at a bar and, you know, they want to hook up. Like, that happens in real life. Like, you know, you see somebody, you're attracted to somebody, you hook up with them, and then you end up having a relationship after the fact. But no, this book was fully surrounded by the fact that like they literally fell in love at first sight, and I just can't handle that. Like, I need a good build up in a story. I need to see the connection, and in this book I definitely did not see it. And then add on the fact that not only was this a forbidden age gap romance, did I not say that it was a teacher student relationship? I'm gonna say that right now, that she was the teacher and he was the student, and therefore the girl was older and the guy was younger. He was 18 and she was 26, and well, I'm all here for forbiddenness and like out there sort of stuff, and I don't really mind teacher-student relationships. I didn't really like the fact that he was younger, not only because he was younger, but because he was still like a kid. Like, he's still 18, and I don't really have an issue with like, you know, the technicalities of it. But what really bothered me about it was that they kept saying how like, I'm not a boy, I'm a man, let me show you. And the way that he showed her is that he was able to like fuck her really, really well. And I'm sorry, but that's not the way that you prove that you're a man. Like, he came off as very like manly, and then I'm just like, well, you're not acting your age. Like, an 18-year-old doesn't act like that. Like, yes, you might be very confident, you might have no shame, everything along those lines, but like, you can't just act that way. And then I agree with it. Like, this book was very all tell and no show. Like, I didn't feel anything. Everything about this book was just them telling me about this, and I just did not like it. And then also, I wasn't so much a fan of the writing style at the beginning. I did very much get used to it like as we went along, but for the first like 50-60 pages of this book, I swear to God, the woman wrote this book with a thesaurus sitting next to her. I'm like, you can simple it down a little bit. Like, we do not need all of these like crazy like extra words out there. Like, just give me very easy, simple stuff that everybody understands and we'd be good, you know? I don't know, the writing, it threw me off. The love at first sight threw me off. It was all tell no show. I thought that the characters were just they were weird. I didn't like the characters at all. And look, a lot of people did agree with me. Like I already talked about this on Instagram, and a lot of people messaged me like, yeah, this wasn't her best book in the series. And I kind of knew that. I knew that you had to read the first couple of books to finally get into the series. But at the end of the day, it's like if she wrote this book and people fell in love with this series with this book, and then they just started like following it as each book came out, then I'm not really sure what you saw in this one, because I probably didn't even say everything that bothered me in this book. But trust me, there was more than just what I just mentioned. And oh my God, did I not like it. Next, I wanted to talk about the Devil's Night series by Penelope Douglas. So I did mention this in a couple of videos as I was reading it. Like in some of my wrap-ups, I did mention how I didn't absolutely love this series. The thing is that this series is so freaking popular on TikTok. Like I originally wasn't going to read this series because I have not had the best luck with Penelope Douglas books specifically. Like I feel like she like writes on this fine line of either you're going to be okay with her work or it's going to make you uncomfortable. And I get somewhere stuck in the middle of that line of like, I am uncomfortable, but I'm wondering if I am liking it or if I'm not. Like the whole time I'm just like, am I fine with this, or is this a little bit too much for me? You know, like that's how I feel when I read every single one of her books. And therefore I just knew that I didn't really want to continue with her work. But then TikTok, for some odd reason, convinced me that I have to try the Devil's Night series. So I did. I made it the first 3 books into the series. I read Corrupt, I read Hideaway, and I read Kill Switch. And oh my God, I actually DNF'd after Kill Switch. And I should have DNF'd after Corrupt. So I'm not gonna lie, I actually did like Corrupt. I was somewhat okay with it. Like there were a lot of stuff in that book that bothered me. Like it was a little bit too intense. Like all of the bullying, everything that they like took all of the characters like to, I just thought was like a little bit too much. Like this was very much of like, oh, they're going to get revenge on this girl because she is the reason that they all landed up in jail for 3 years. And now that they're all back, they're ready to, you know, like ruin her life. And then they definitely do ruin her life, like very much so. Like they burn down her house and they basically kidnap her mother and they take away all of her money. She's like an heiress, like she has millions and millions of dollars, and they literally stole all her money. Like I'm sorry, but everything that they did, you took it one step too far. And for some reason, as I was reading it, I was so freaking intrigued that I was somewhat okay with it. And by the end of the story, when the romance finally kicked in and everything finally worked out, yada, 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 I ended up being like, okay, I kind of liked it because I didn't really want to put this book down. So I was fine with it. So I'm like, okay, fine, let's continue on with the series, because I heard that book 3 is actually the best one in the series. And I'm like, I gotta get there. If I liked book 1 somewhat, then maybe I'll like the rest of the series. And then, oh my God, was I wrong. Hideaway was one of the worst books I ever read. I am not someone who's like, oh my God, I need a really big plot to like get through the story. Like, no, I'm a very character-driven sort of person, and I could not get myself through Hideaway, mostly because there was not a lot of a plot there whatsoever. And the somewhat plot that there was, I did not understand the point of it at all. And then add on the fact that even though it was a very character-driven book, I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like their storylines. I didn't like the way that it all worked out. Everything about it. I'm not like, come on, every single thing about that book, I very much didn't like. But I'm like, you know what? Book 3 is the best one in the series, supposedly, so I gotta keep going. And I went there and I ended up very much hating it. Like the plot line of the overarching story of this entire series totally fell off the face of the planet. Totally was like just hardly really there. And it was very confusing. Like I feel like all these books were very, 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 very long for absolutely no freaking reason. I also didn't even mention that all of these books are dual timeline as well as dual perspective. And if you know me, which you don't, but I do talk about this often on my channel, so maybe you do know this. I am not the hugest fan of dual timeline, and you will see that when I get into the rest of the books that I'm about to be talking about in this video. But my point is that I'm not a huge fan of dual timeline, and specifically in these books, they are all dual timeline. And what I very much didn't like about it is that all of the past timelines, I was like, okay, I get it. I kind of see their story. I see where they started, you know, and I felt it there. But then in this timeline, like the present day, I was just like, but what's there? Like you guys you never ended up making it in the past for one reason or another. So like, what is pulling you together in the present day? Not that much. And like, I don't know, I just didn't see it. Like I have an issue with dual timelines. balance. Like for some reason, I always end up feeling that way of like, well, I saw you in the past, but like I'm not feeling the same connection in the present. And I definitely felt that in this series. Like how much can I say about it? You know, like do we want to sit here for 10 minutes? My point is that I can go on forever of what bothered me in this series. And all I'm going to say is that I very much didn't like it. I should have listened to myself when I said that I shouldn't continue on with Penelope Douglas's work. And even though I was somewhat okay with book 1, I ended up hating the rest of the series and I never made it to the last book. So while we're on the topic of dual timelines, I figured I'd talk about Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, which is the last book that I ever read by this author. I was slowly trying to make my way through their backlog because they were the first authors that ever introduced me to adult contemporary romances. I had read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating maybe like 2 years ago. I fell in love with it, and ever since then, I have moved from YA romances into the adult genre. And basically, their book is the reason why I am here where I am, reading really dark and smutty romances all the time. So I obviously have to be very grateful to them. And also, I did very much enjoy almost all of their books as I read them throughout the past 2 years. But now that I read this book and I realized a couple of things about them and their writing, I realized that if I would pick up a lot of their books that I read in the past and read them now, I don't think I would like them as much as I liked them in the moment that I read them. So that's just a thought that I had in my head I wanted to throw out there. But specifically for this book, which I absolutely hated, I didn't like it for a couple of reasons, but the most important thing was that it was a dual timeline, and the thing that happened at the end of the book that happened really in the past that we only find out about at the end of the book, I very much didn't like, and I thought that it was so bad for so many reasons. So in this book, you're following these two people. They were best friends as children. They really connected at the time, and eventually they grew to really liking each other. They started dating, and then something happened that pulled them apart for the next 11 years. And then jump 11 years later, and you're following the present day as they bump into each other again, and then you get to see their romance happening in the present day and then finally be together. So my issue with this book was that about 1/3 of the way in, I realized what the ending was going to be. Like, what was this big bang that pulled them apart? Like, I already got the feeling a quarter of the way in, and it was a trigger warning for me that I didn't want to see. And nobody warned me about that happening in this book, and it ruined the whole book for me. And then when I got there, I was disappointed, I was underwhelmed, I was upset. Everything about the thing that happened at the end of this book, I absolutely hated for multiple reasons. I think that it wasn't handled well. I think that it was like a little bit brushed over, some of the stuff that happened. I also think that it was a trigger warning that nobody warned me about, and I wouldn't have picked this book up if I knew about it. And also there were so many details about it that I think were completely off. And it happens to be, if you want to hear more about what I'm talking about, if you haven't read this book and you don't know what I'm talking about, I actually made an entire reading vlog about this book as I was reading it, because I thought it was going to be such a great book because everybody raved about it and I saw it all over the place and people absolutely die for this book. So I'm like, you know what? Let's vlog my experience of me falling in love with a book. And then it ended up being me vlogging my experience of me slowly going downhill and absolutely hating it. So if you want to hear more about my thoughts on this book and what I'm talking about this big ending that I absolutely hated with a passion, then watch that vlog. I'll have it linked in the description below. And then extremely similarly to Love and Other Words, I absolutely also hated People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. So I had read a beach read right when it came out because it was so hyped up and everybody seemed to have loved it. So I picked it up and I thought it was okay. Like, it was okay enough that I'll see what else this author writes when she comes out with a new book. So I read this book when it came out and then I absolutely hated it. And I've decided I'm never reading another book by this author because we just don't vibe. So this is another dual timeline book about these two people who they met in college, they became best friends, and they would go on vacation with each other all the freaking time. And then one day when they were on vacation, something happened that pulled them apart, and then they haven't talked for 2 years, and now it's the present day, it's 2 years later, and they finally connect again, and they decide to go on one more vacation to see if they can mend their friendship because they're both miserable without each other. And then obviously you're gonna get to see their relationship unfold in the present day. So again, with this book, I was extremely underwhelmed with the ending of the past, of like what happened that pulled them apart all that time ago. Like, the thing that happened was so freaking underwhelming that by the time I got there, I literally wanted to throw this book and be like, I don't even care to finish it, you know? And besides for that, which, like, okay, I should have expected it to be a little bit underwhelming because that tends to be the issue with dual timelines for me. But But not only that, but I absolutely hated that 90% of this book was all past. Like, I just didn't see their connection as much in the present day. And I thought that it wasn't evenly spaced out of like everything that we're seeing in the past, everything that we're seeing in the present. Like, if you're going to give us the relationship happening in the present day, then I need to see their connection a lot. And the only connection that I somewhat saw was in their past. And I guess that's just what you get with dual timelines, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just not a fan of that layout. It gives me a lot of anxiety. I don't think that it ends up being a completely balanced book, especially in the, sense of relationships, etc., etc., etc. I think you get my point. I basically really didn't like this book. Next, I have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. So this was one of the most popular books of last year, probably. I saw this all over the place for so freaking long. It blew up on TikTok. I'd be surprised if you don't know what it's about, but in case you aren't aware, it is a fake dating romance. These two scientists, one is a student, one is a professor, ends up fake dating for specific circumstances, and obviously they're gonna fall in love. So people seem to have really enjoyed this book, and I didn't. So my biggest issue with it, like when I was reading it, I remember being like, I need more of the romance. Like, I feel like it was 30% romance, 70% science. And if I'm reading a rom-com, especially a fake dating book, I need to see them interacting. I need to see them fake dating very often. I need to see their relationship build and them turning from fake dating into, oh my God, I think I really feel something for this person, And I didn't really get that. They literally went on like one fake date a week, which was to go get coffee. And for a long time in this book, that was literally all they did. Like, there were hardly any interactions with these two characters until you threw in a one-bench trope, threw in a sex scene, and all of a sudden these two people are madly in love. Like, I'm sorry, but like the relationship buildup was just not there for me. And then throw in the fact that I thought that these characters were a little bit 2D. Like, I don't know. I know that they liked science. I know that this guy was a grump. He was very standoffish. Everybody seemed to hate him. And then this girl was the one girl who kind of like saw through that and realized that he's a cinnamon roll. My issue is that like, you can't just tell me that. You have to show it to me. Like, and I just didn't get to see it because for so long, they weren't even together. Like, I need a romance that has two people who are having the romance, the forefront of the story, like interacting every single chapter. And we did have chapters in this book where the characters weren't interacting. And that was my biggest issue with this book. But then, we could go into further detail of how like, okay, this is a fanfic book. Like, this originated as like the Star Wars, I forgot what their names are, but this was originally a fan fiction book and she made it into an actual like rom-com, regularly published book. And I get that. And therefore, like, I get why the writing was a little off for me. And like, it was very fan fiction based. She's a fan fiction writer. And therefore, I kind of felt that in the book. And I didn't realize that bothered me until somebody pointed it out. And then I'm like, yeah, that's why I wasn't liking it. Like, there are a lot of stuff in this book that I could just try to point out and tell you why I didn't like it. But my biggest issue with it was the romance, because this is a romance book. And if you're not going to give me a book that is majority romance, then I'm sorry, but then don't give me the book. I also wanted to chat about the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert. So that's Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Actor Age, Eve Brown, and Take a Hint, Danny Brown. I think I said that out of order, but my point is that I read all three books and I hated every single one of these books. And everybody that I see talk about these books ends up loving it. Like, I don't really see people say bad things about these books. And I'm like, did we read the same book? Because I don't feel like we did. I very much didn't like this book right from the bat because of the writing style. Like, all three of these books were dual perspective and third person point of view. And I have a really hard time with that sort of writing, only because I just don't know whose eyes we're looking out of. Like, sometimes you would jump from like one character to the next and I'm just like, wait, who are we talking about now? Like, I had such a hard time following the book. And because of that, I was like pulled out of the story left and right. Like, when I'm reading a book, I need to be like fully into it. Like, I have to not realize that I'm reading. I just have to be like experiencing it. And if the writing makes me tumble left and right, then obviously I'm going to be pulled out and I'm just not going to connect to the story as much. So that was my first initial shock of this book, of like, I really can't stand the writing style. And then I also didn't really like the way that like she would say stuff. Like, I don't know, some of these characters would go and say words where I'm like, people don't really talk like that these days. Like, oh, hi, darling. And it was like, I don't know, I can't even remember what it was. But like, I remember there was like this word usage of like darling all the freaking time. And like the way that like these three siblings, their parents would talk really bothered me. And I'm just like, people don't really talk this way, do they? Like, it felt very off to me. And I just kept being pulled out of the story because of that. And then get to the romance and I just didn't feel any single one of them. Like, supposedly these romance romances are like really cute. You know, like people love them. They're a little bit steamy. They have really cute connections, yada, yada, yada. Like I've heard what people say about it, and I just did not see it in any single one of these books. Like I forced myself through every single one of these books, and I'm like, this was supposed to be a cute romance, and I feel like I am not reading the same book as everybody. So whatever. I read these books a very long time ago, so I can't really remember off the top of my head like real details about what actually bothered me, but just know that I absolutely hated all three of these books. I forced myself through every single one of them because of how hyped they were and how everybody said like, oh my God, it just gets better and better as you get later into the series. And I'm sorry, but I just didn't see it. And the last book I quickly wanted to share with you is Priest by Sierra Simone. So I actually did an entire rant review about this book because I so much hated it when I read it. And I'm like, this is such a hyped book. I don't know what everybody saw in it. So if you wanted to check out that video, I'll make sure that it's linked down below. But I'll just quickly tell you that this book is about a priest and this girl that comes in to a confessional, and she basically says how she's very horny and she should feel ashamed about it, but she doesn't. And what should she do about it? She needs some guidance. And he hears her voice, can't stay away from her, basically gets a hard on in confessional, and ends up fucking her left and right all over the church, like on the altar, on a piano, on the floor, everywhere. You know, I mean, this book is extremely dirty, and I'm not gonna lie, I saw the hotness in these sex scenes, but everything else about this book, I was not here for it. Like, I need a good build-up, a good connection between characters when I'm reading a romance, and I didn't see it. This was very much insta-lust, where he basically went against every single thing that he believed in just because he couldn't hold himself back. And I can go into detail about how problematic I think that this book was, in the sense of like, why did this guy become a priest if he is this crazy horny guy who likes really fucked up sexual things? Like, somebody like that should never have committed to the life of celibacy. Like, it didn't make sense to me. Like, I get it how like that pulled into the idea of like, you know, him having really hot sex all over his church with this girl that came in for some guidance. But my point is that it shouldn't have even started off that way of him becoming a priest. Like, he should have helped his community in a different way other than becoming the next priest who's going to end up fucking up the community anyway. You know, like, I'm sorry, I'm not really going to get into so much about what I didn't like this book because I already made a whole video on it. But my point is that I didn't like it a lot for many reasons, mostly because there was no connection in the romance for me. It was instant lust. I didn't feel it. The only thing that was there for me was the sex. And I'm sorry, but I don't want to read a book that is just about sex. I really need the connection to be really into the sex. So that is that. I'm sorry for being such a grump today. I was just down to get it all out. I was down to be negative a little bit, and I hope that you enjoyed watching me rant about all of these books. I'm curious to know if you agree with my thoughts or if you have more thoughts to share, because I am sure that a lot of people will have some really good points to mention to further explain why these books are not that great. So leave a comment down below if you have anything to add. I'm sure I will agree with you, and I just forgot to mention it in the moment while I was making this video because there are so many thoughts in my head and I can never get it all out. But my point is that leave a comment down below if you enjoyed watching this video. Give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to my channel, subscribe, because why not? You made it to the end of this video. It means you enjoy my content, so you should subscribe so that you get notified when my next video comes out. But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for clicking on my video, and until next time, enjoy reading.